Well, I don't have much money, and I don't have much time, and I don't have many friends I could call mine. And I've been deceived, yeah, but haven't we all? I've seen the sun rise, and I've seen the sun fall. Well, I don't know why, and I don't know where, and I don't even know how, and I no longer care. But I've seen your face, and I've heard your call. Yes, I've seen the sun rise, and I've seen the sun fall. I've seen the sun hang like a flame in the sky. Yes, I've seen the sun turn, and I've seen the sun die. And I often think now, before our time is run, will there be any thoughts for what we have done? Well, I don't have much money, and I don't have much time, and I don't have many friends I could call mine. And when the night spills into the darkness of my soul, when the time comes for me to leave you, don't let me go. And you can call out my name, and you can call out my name.
Most pulpits are occupied by good men who are telling people to be good, and then they'll have a chance of heaven. But you know, the real gospel's not that. The gospel is for sinners. You don't have to be good to be saved. You do have to be saved to be good. And whosoever will may come, and all manner of sin and blasphemy shall be forgiven unto men. It's not who you are, it's whose you are. And you can come just as you are. He won't leave us just as we are. We don't have to worry about what God thinks of us. Only what he thinks of Christ, our substitute. When you hear the real gospel of the New Testament, the historic objective gospel that was preached by Christ and Paul, by Luther, by Wesley, then you know you have the verdict of the last judgment the moment you believe. You have everlasting life the moment you believe. You are accepted in the beloved. You're complete in him, despite stumblings, failures, 100 or more a day, not counted against us. Not one drop of the wrath of God can ever fall upon a believer.
Don't fall for the trap that people set up when they say it's not possible to keep the commandments.
He's got it.
Hey, hello, he's got it. And welcome to another SDAQ&A. My very special guest today is Harvey. Am I getting this right? Brenneise? Brenneise. Oh, I practiced it and everything. Sorry about that. Harvey Brenneise, and it's great to have you here with us today. And I can see there your husband in the background, Mike, on the computer there. He can't hear us, but he's been helping us fix some of the tech issues we had. So those watching, Harvey, his mic's a little bit low. You might want to crank it up your end there, those watching, so that you can hear his voice as he speaks today. Thanks everyone for your support. If you scan the QR code there, you can make a donation via PayPal to what I'm doing. And I was away most of last week, so unfortunately we didn't have interviews apart from the Tuesday interview, which I brought a bit forward, which I think was with Alison. I think that was our last interview, and that was a very fascinating interview. Now, Harvey, in our conversation today, in the promo for the conversation today, we caused quite a stir, and I think you'd probably say I caused the stir by the title. I called it "Fired for Being Gay." When we first started talking about having on the show, we were mainly talking about discussing why you left and Ellen G. White and that kind of thing, and I really want to get to that today as well. But if you're okay, share with us a little bit about your background. Your time as an Adventist. You were involved with being a librarian, a teacher, a professor. Tell us a little bit about that background, and then share with us your experience of being fired and how that happened. Over to you.
Can you hear me?
Can hear you, yes.
I grew up in Mountain View, California, the home of the Pacific Press at that time. That was established by James and Ellen in 1875 so that they could make more money on royalties than they could get from the Review. It was established in California, and not initially in Mountain View, but it ended up there in 1906. My father was an employee there for his entire career after World War II. And he is what we later call the prostitute, somebody from the press. Not a very nice name, but we liked it. I went to the parochial school there in Mountain View and the academy, so 12 years of that. And then I went to Andrews University as a student, undergraduate, with a year at Newbold College. And I ended up with both a bachelor's and a master's degree from Andrews. It's been 50 years. What has it been? 60 years? We have some anniversary this year for 1974 anyway. And we may go back. Then I went out teaching, first in Napa, California, then in Charlotte, North Carolina, and then went to library school at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. From there, the library director at Andrews, Mary Jane Mitchell, knew I was there, and she wanted somebody to coordinate the technology stuff, the transitions that needed to happen. she was a very wise and insightful woman. And so she thought getting somebody straight out of library school was a good idea. And during that time, I also got married. And we can talk about that separately.
Yeah. Yeah.
Went back to Andrews and was there for, I think, 18 years, eventually being a full professor with tenure. I was mostly in the reference department, but also in systems operation. So I did a lot of good things for them. I managed the Seventh-day Adventist Periodical Index for much of that time. Was associated with the Adventist Librarians Association, helped found it actually.
Wow.
So that kind of gives the intro to the rest. I don't know what else you want.
What years were you at? Did you have tenure at Andrews?
I did have tenure, yes.
Yeah. What years was that?
Well, I left in, I was just looking at the documentation a little bit. I believe it was 1997 I left. I don't remember the year I got tenure. I'd have to go look at my
Check.
CV.
But roughly
Which
around
might or
that.
might not tell that question.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
we had have two children, neither of whom will speak to me. It was messy. I'm going to write a little biography for Kinship. They just were asking for that today. So I was thinking about that. I've always been gay. I just had no way to deal with it. So
When you were,
I'm sorry?
I was just going to say, when you were younger, even you knew quite early on that you were
I have
gay.
a photograph of an illustration in the Bible story that I probably first saw when I was, well, I think that was published about 57. So, and I was born in 51. So I was probably 6 or 7 years old. It's a picture of the good thief at Calvary. And the illustrator illustrated it in a very hot way, frankly. And I was really attracted to it.
Wow.
He's half naked and tied to the cross, not nailed. Hairy chest, all the other good things that some of us gay boys like. Hairy armpits, even. So looking back on it, I can see that it was always there. I was never interested in the girls. When I was in 6th grade, I fell in love with a classmate. He was straight, so that never went anywhere. And then in academy with another guy. Went on all the social events with girls, but we were friends. I was never trying to get into their pants or anything. No lust. There has to be lust as well as love.
Yeah.
In a successful marriage, I think.
Got to be the chemistry there. Yeah.
The chemistry, and it has to be natural. It can't be forced.
Yeah, exactly.
So I did end up during that period, probably about the time of the graduate degree, I'd have to look at it again. I met Coral on a Europe trip that Merlene Ogden led. And we got along as friends, and somehow or other I convinced myself that it would all come together if we got married. Well, it really didn't. We did manage to have 2 children, but just barely.
Did she, when you kind of eventually did tell her that you were gay, that would have been a difficult conversation. Would have been difficult for your whole family, I guess. But did she have an awareness of like, yeah, I knew all along, and did she feel betrayed?
That's a good question. You better ask her. I would like to have answers to actually some of those questions, because surely she must have figured it out early on. But my kids, when they were very young, they were toddlers, discovered some gay porn in the basement under the house, where I didn't think they would ever go. And that came out, and nothing was ever said about it. We never talked about it. Adventists are very good at keeping secrets and denying reality. That's part of the culture. Pretend, and it's all a pretense. It's all a show.
Yeah.
So when things flew apart at the end, and I was looking at some of my documents just before we came online to see if I could reconstruct a little bit better what happened. And I think it was a combination of two things now that I looked at the documents. One was that I was seen by members of the community kissing a man at the South Bend airport. And of course, that came back into the gossip mill. Nothing more than that. I did kiss him on the lips, but I think they snooped electronically. In fact, I think there's pretty direct evidence that they did. And while you can't really prove anything with that, you can see patterns. And so I do have the documents of the process of them letting me go. And moral turpitude is what they called it. Although, I don't think they had any direct evidence of that. Kissing is hardly moral turpitude, and I don't know what exactly was in the emails. But I didn't at that point have Gmail wasn't around yet. Google hadn't yet gobbled up Mountain View and taken over the streams of light from the Pacific Press.
Yeah.
And so, it was all there, and I think somebody didn't recognize any kind of right of privacy.
Yeah.
Because by that point, there was moral turpitude. I was playing around when I went to library conferences.
Someone sent me a copy this week of the form you have to sign when you have Adventist employment, and it does say it doesn't say anything about gay fidelity, but it talks about fidelity. During that time, were you married still?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I was married until after all of that happened, and I've got documents from her too. She was desperately trying to save things, and they were quite determined that there was no way. There were other people on faculty that said, well, you can have what did they call it? Mixed orientation marriage, and have therapy and yada, 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 and somehow make it work. But I don't think it would have worked for us.
No. And was there almost a part of you that wanted to be found out and to somehow kind of just bring it out into the open and force your hand, so to speak?
I think you can make a good argument for that. Yeah.
So part of you might have felt that you were mistreated from a career point of view, but another part of you might think, well, I was going against the guidelines I signed as an potential employee at the start.
I don't remember the guidelines, so I probably don't even have the copies of what
that sort of stuff. Yeah. So when it happened, though, and look, by the way, we're having a few people are having trouble hearing us. Just give us a bit of a vote in the comments, everyone, if we should persevere or try again next week, and maybe see if we can get a different mic your end if possible, Harvey. But I'll just let me know in the comments if it's worth persevering, because it's such an important and interesting topic. I'd hate for people to come to the whole end of it and go, well, we're not going to watch it or listen because we couldn't hear it properly. So
we can find another mic.
We'll
find the one that we have, or buy another one that comes on.
Yeah. So we'll persist until we get a little bit of a vote. You're getting lots of good positive comments about the cap, so make sure you wear that if we do come back and do a part 2. But
I'm trying to get as close to the camera as I can, but of course,
people are saying the sound is okay, so that's fine. We'll persist. I think it's only people but no, people are saying don't stop. They can hear enough, so that's good. We'll keep persisting.
Somebody commented about the cap, and just so you know, I don't usually wear it in the house. I have a dermatology issue going on, and it looks pretty severe if you actually see it.
Yes.
So I'm hiding that.
Look, the vote is to keep going, so we'll keep persisting with that. So I'm interested in our promo for this, it polarized pretty quickly, and one thing I like to do at SDA Q&A is actually make it okay for us to talk about polarizing views, divergent views, diverse views, but to still do it in a civil way and to still try and find common ground so we can remain friends. There's a bell curve. Obviously, some people, it's not for them. That's fine. But I want to try and bring it back to the personal side of it, people's feelings. And sure, you might be able to go, well, the Bible says this, or the Bible says that, or the administration, my employer said this, and how I want to bring it back to how all that kind of makes you feel, because I want to personalize it to and humanize it for people to watch, because I think it's so easy just to kind of lean into that, well, the Bible says this, or you should have been fired because you were doing that. I want to take it back down, kind of slow down that pace of judgment, and just go back to how did you feel when they first were contacting you and saying, look, we don't want to employ you anymore.
And the question is how I felt?
Yeah, when you first kind of got that email, hey, someone saw you kissing at the airport, we don't want you working for us anymore. You've breached the guidelines.
I doubt that it came, and this is what I can't reconstruct, at least without looking at more of the evidence. And I don't have a complete record of that. But being a librarian and a historian, I do like records. I suspect that my boss, the library director, called me into his office and we had a conversation. I would expect that that's the way that it happened. Now, I didn't read the letter I have from him. I do have a letter from him in my files, but I doubt it didn't come as some kind of edict directly from the president initially. That isn't the way they would operate. I would be surprised if that's the way that it came. I think it came through a direct conversation.
Right. So was there a time period of turmoil where there was a bit of backing and forthing where you were saying, no, I don't want to be fired? Or did you just kind of go, yeah, okay. So tell us a bit about how that unfolded.
And well, I was just looking at the documentation of that, but I was doing it on short notice, so I didn't look at every piece. My then wife, Coral, was definitely involved in it. She was also fighting for her dream house. We had just built a house in the woods, and we got along great in that process, but we hadn't had sex in years. My younger child, my daughter, was in about the 6th. I think she was in either the 6th or the 7th grade. But she was definitely trying to pull things together, and it did take place over a few weeks at least. This would have been in September-ish 1978. By November, I think it was, they had given and they were quite adamant, and that I can't see from the records. There was no real negotiation on that. It was just the terms of separation. There wasn't any real negotiation over whether it could be pulled together. There were others on the faculty who thought that, but it wasn't coming from the president, who was Niels Erik Andreasen. I don't think there was an academic vice president at that particular moment, but there was a director of personnel involved as well. Some things are easy to see from the documents.
Yeah.
Some I just have notes, and they're a little sketchy.
So did it escalate and get to a point where it just came to a head?
I wouldn't call it escalation. I think they made their mind up, probably based on emails more than the incident at the airport. But of course, the incident at the airport was a public event. The emails obviously weren't. The incident at the airport, they're very shame based. It's a very shame based culture, and they don't like any damage to their image.
Mm.
See that, that fed directly into the gossip column, the gossips on campus, some of them probably already had their suspicions.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, a friend of mine was a teacher at an Adventist primary school and gay, and he used to play keyboard in my band every now and again. And
Yeah.
when one day we were driving home from a gig in Sydney, and we must have been in our 30s, and he said, "Oh, I've got to tell you something." And I said, "Yeah, yeah." He said, "I'm gay." I said, "Yeah,
I already know.
I've always known, and I didn't even think that you thought I didn't know. I thought we just knew, and it just, and I said I knew that when you were in grade 6. He and I were at the same primary school when we were at school, and I said we knew that then."
I'm sure there
But
were a few people that were surprised.
yeah, but when he came out, he lost his job also. I might be wrong. I'm pretty sure I'm accurate on this one, but a lot of parents back then, and this is a while ago now, they were like worried that his gayness might be something that A, rubbed off onto their children, or B, that might be a bit that he might kind of that he might be inappropriate with the children, and he was just horrified at that because he just was totally not. There's no equating the two.
Well, at the time this happened, I actually was in a position that had no contact with the public at all. I had been a reference librarian most of my time there, but I was dealing with the collection and the systems, the electronic systems only. So there was no contact. My office was actually hidden back, ironically, in the seminary library.
And it sounds like you really enjoyed your work as well. You enjoyed your job.
I did.
Yeah.
I always enjoyed, because there's so many aspects in that profession that you can do, some of which I only did after I'd left there. Cataloging, for example, I never did that when I was at Andrews because they had a big enough library. They had specialists do that. So there was a lot to learn, and it was a time of real transition in libraries too. We went from a card catalog to an electronic catalog, and we moved the card catalog out of that area and converted it into a proper reference station finally. I was in charge when that happened. It was interesting to manage the transition.
What do you? My understanding. I'll just quickly bring up a funny comment that Simon Houston made. And Simon was on the show the other day. It's a really, really interesting interview between me and a few others. He and I and a few others. He wrote, "Imagine a religious sect so small that it has less members than the Mickey Mouse Club worrying about its public image." And Ray writes, "Adventists are a Mickey Mouse organization."
Okay, yes, I see you've got a number of interesting comments there.
So my understanding, so when I first left the church 8 years ago, I guess the main kind of tipping point for me was watching the no vote for women's ordination, and I had a little daughter at that point, 2 little daughters, and I thought, you know what, I just can't put my name to that. No longer do I see this as a theological issue. I see it as an ethical issue. But what I've noticed with women's ordination and what I would call, in my humble opinion, the suppression of women, like using ordination as a tool of suppression. There's nothing about ordination that's even biblical. But what I've noticed is that my gay and LGBT plus friends, the suppression is even stronger for them. I'm pretty sure they're not allowed to hold any kind of position in the Adventist church, whereas women can have any position
there are
apart from anything that requires ordination.
there have been a few individual churches that have allowed them to do things. But the recent incident involving the Glendale Church in California and the Boulder Church in Colorado shows how much Uncle Teddy is watching and controlling things.
What are those two incidents? I don't know those.
It was Dave Ferguson, a friend of mine, actually, a gay friend who I think he's married to a man, was moving back to Colorado, I think, and tried to transfer and wanted to have his membership transferred from Glendale to Boulder. And basically, the conference in Colorado wouldn't allow it, probably from orders from Washington. He felt that, see, I've never asked him this directly, he is a Facebook friend, why it was so important that he be or have his membership transferred. Why not just start going to church there if that's what you want? But he is actually a trained and I believe ordained minister, he just wasn't in that role. And he felt that he couldn't do some things without that ordination. So I think what we're seeing from Washington, or from, what is it now, Silver Spring, orders coming down that's actually becoming more homophobic, not less so. And I think we can, at least in North America and probably in Europe, and I don't know about Australia, as the Adventist Church becomes the Church of the South, and that is definitely happening. The institutions are suffering because of the demographics. The younger people just aren't going to church or to the Adventist schools anymore. Mountain View Academy just had a graduation. I think they had 13 or 14 graduates. We had 60. And that school was built for that. Here they sit on a piece of property in Mountain View that's probably worth close to $100 million because it's a whole square block.
Wow.
Right in the middle of town.
Yeah.
There they sit with this big building and just a few students rattling around in it. So, and the schools, including Andrews, are suffering because they just don't have the demographics to support what they're trying to do. So I think what we're seeing is an increase in the move to fundamentalism and evangelical direction. And of course, we know with that group what they're trying to accomplish politically in this country, at least partially due to your Australian guy Murdoch, who's come over and polluted the press here. So I think that's the direction that we're seeing, but I think it's also an indirect acknowledgement that their whole apocalyptic is wrong. Jesus isn't around the corner. He hasn't come back. It's going to be 200 years now in a couple of decades. And when you look at it going back into Ellen, she's the one that dreamed a good share of it up, not all of it. None of that stuff's going to happen. Sunday law is impossible. It was impossible in her day. If you look at the demographics.
Yeah. And there's a tendency towards last generation theology, which I personally think has been there since the beginning. and that's easy to prove, but there's a real flourishing of it again at the moment because of that sense of urgency that not only is Jesus coming soon, but we have to be ready and we have to make sure that we are living and doing our part to be good Adventists to hasten that return. Does that make them want to kind of sweep out all the make sure the gays are all out, make sure all the out of the church, make sure the women definitely don't get to be ordained? Is there a sense of we've really got to tighten up the ship, which puts pressure on people, that are gay within the church? Because someone said to me this week, so many people in the church probably are gay and in some kind of leadership, but have to hide it. So they're essentially living a double life. And
Sure.
with this
I just
later,
watched a movie this week about Rock Hudson
right?
and
Yeah,
how he had to hide it for
yeah,
decades in Hollywood while they created another false image of him. Then he died of AIDS. They couldn't hide it anymore.
yeah. So it's not just an Adventist thing, is it? But maybe with Adventism, it's a bit intensified because of this urgency of the Lord's coming back soon. Not only do we have to get ready, we have to be the remnant people. We are the people that keep the commandments and have the spirit of prophecy.
Yeah, I guess a lot of them still buy into that stuff, but I think, why are all the children and grandchildren not in that church anymore? I mean, I've asked a number of
Mm,
Adventist academics that I know, or my generation, that, what are your children and grandchildren doing? They're not there. John McAdams, his family isn't Adventist anymore. He was president of Southwestern Adventist University. In fact, suppressed his own paper about her plagiarism until after he retired. It's finally been published. I have an earlier version of it in my Crazy Ellen file, which I shared.
mm.
He
It's
knew
a
better.
fascinating read.
But nobody really ever looks at how realistic that stuff was in her own day. The world was 2/3 non-Christian even then. I've looked it up. The percentages stayed about the same. Although the so-called Christian part of the world, Europe in particular, but increasingly the US and probably Australia as well, less and less Christian all the time. That's what we're seeing in this election, is those who have lost that culture war are trying to take it back politically, and that's what makes it so dangerous. I know it's not the focus of our meeting tonight, but I think the environment is, there are a lot of Trump supporters in the Adventist Church. Unfortunately, we don't have any sociologists alive anymore who will do that kind of research so we can have the numbers. In the old days, two sociologists at Andrews actually used to do that kind of research, Kreider and Kistler. I've asked the sociologists that I know around Andrews whether anybody's, what's going on in the Adventist Church politically. Nobody seems to know, except when they go into the churches and listen to what is being said or look at the bumper stickers in the parking lot.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. So we've got all these external political influences, and Kelly Berner's written, "I do wholeheartedly believe that Jesus Christ will return soon at any time, and she has no fear." I guess what I'm talking about is not just an urgency of the end of time, but Ellen White often said back in her day that Jesus would have returned now if you guys had been keeping the proper Seventh-day Adventist mission going and it followed the third angel's message. And that is what I call last generation theology, that people have the power to hasten Christ's return by doing the right thing. And that's why I'm wondering that, sure, there's all sorts of external political pressure, but within the Adventist Church, there's another little bit of a pressure cooker going on that, having gays in any kind of responsible leadership, if that's going to be seen by God as wrong, we'd better make sure we kick them all out and try and hasten this return of Christ. I guess I was trying to.
It's a narcissistic belief system. I don't see any other way to see it. We have the truth, and everybody else, if they don't come over to our side, they're going to be damned. That's narcissism. We're the remnant. We have the truth, capital T. When did you come into the truth? People will ask each other.
Yes.
How arrogant can they be?
Yeah. Well, how do you find when people, just a little bit of a side issue, when people say, "Oh, so you're claiming to be the remnant church," and most people go, "No, we're part of the remnant." It's this real fluid kind of Adventist apology, kind of, you can't pin them down on anything.
That's a typical defense mechanism.
Yeah.
Very defensive group.
Yes, and easily upset, I've discovered.
What's called the Biblical Research Institute for probably 100 years or more was the Defense Literature Committee.
Yeah.
That's what it was called. At least it was honest.
Yes.
They were defending themselves against the people that were criticizing them.
Mm.
It'd be interesting to go back and look at the historical record, which I haven't done, and I don't have the time to do it, is why people weren't figuring out how Ellen White's game in her own day, including the Sunday law nonsense.
Mm.
India was no more likely to have a Sunday law in 1900 than it is now. It's a Hindu and Muslim nation.
Yeah, yeah.
I have a friend that was actually the consul general, U.S. consul general in India, and he agrees.
Yeah. Yeah, Adventism has this endless loop, and it's difficult to have a conversation about what Adventists believe because they don't really want to be pinned down on what that belief is, even though we all kind of know what it is. I want to just address this idea of compassion towards the LGBT plus community, to the gay community within Adventism. There's a lot of people, there seems to me to be kind of the political group that go, well, we can't really have you. We've got to kind of keep a tight ship. There's another group that are definitely, this is evil. This is an abomination. You should be out. There's another group that goes, we love you. We want you in every possible point of leadership. And we don't believe there's anything wrong biblically with being gay. And then there's another group that goes, hey, we love the gospel Adventism. We want to accept you. We don't want to be kicking you out, but we think you need to be celibate. So there's those kind of four groups. A lot of people have surprised me that are in that kind of more progressive Adventism. They like a bit of a progressive theology, worship style, etc. But it's been revealed to me that a lot of them, while they want to support the gay person in the Adventist church, they do think it's not biblically sound. So I'm interested in just talking about that a little bit. So we want the compassion. The group that says, yes, be gay, it's not biblical, we can prove it. And then the group that says, yes, we still want compassion, but we do believe the Bible is against it. Where have you landed on that? So we want to bring the compassion in. We want to accept people that are gay. But at what point do you think that the Bible is opposed to it or not? Which side of the fence have you landed on that?
Well, I don't see the Bible as an authority on anything.
Yeah.
I see it as a secular document that's important historically and literarily. The way it was put together is extremely sloppy. Even Ellen G. herself quoted from the Apocrypha, so why isn't that in the Bible too?
Yeah.
You look at how the canon developed, and how can you consider that anything?
Yeah.
More than interesting historically, you have conflicting accounts of creation, Genesis 1 and 2, with two different gods. Most people in English-speaking worlds don't realize it because one is translated God, another is translated Lord, and they think it's the same God. Well, it isn't. El is not Yahweh. Later on, they merged. Later on, the Hebrews merged those into one, the idea of one God. But in Canaanite times, those are two different gods. Those are two different creation accounts. That's a book being authoritative.
That's fascinating.
The flood didn't happen, so
yeah.
What authority do you put into this? But actually, if you do decide to accept it, there are 6 clobber verses.
Yeah, I was just going to say the clobber. Yeah. Before we go into the clobber texts, I just want to...
That's not very much text to base it on.
No.
But I think you can explain them all away if that's what you want to do.
Well, I'm interested. I'm very interested in what you've got to say about the clobber text. But just before we get to that, it's just interesting. I was, as you know, driving back from Melbourne this morning, which I broke up into 2 trips. So I was up at the crack of dawn and before dawn driving. But I just randomly started listening to a podcast that this lady's written a couple of books on the Gnostic Gospels that aren't in the Bible. They form part of the apocryphal works, but not all of them. There's about 50 books apparently. Book of Thomas and Judas, all these ones. Yeah, very interesting. But it was the fascinating part of it. She alluded to something that you just said, where there are kind of two gods. It's almost a polytheistic view, the Old Testament and New Testament.
They did come out of Canaanite polytheism.
Yeah,
The
exactly.
whole monotheism developed over centuries.
And she was talking about and even Mark refers to this, where Jesus talks in parables and analogies, allegory, etc. But he speaks of a secret gospel, which is more aimed at the more mature. You want to go to the next level. You want to learn more about what the gospel really is. And that's where the Book of Thomas comes in, and some of these other books, the secret gospels. And they're just a little bit more advanced, I guess. But it was a fascinating podcast. And I thought, well, there's a whole show we can do one day on that topic itself.
Well, you could probably get somebody in here who actually knows about
who knows that stuff. Yeah, but you made me think.
I don't consider myself one of them.
No, but I thought it was interesting that you exactly what I was just listening to before I came on air. You raised.
You start with the verse in Leviticus. Well, who keeps the Levitical code even among Jews anymore?
Yeah.
And what about all the other forbidden things in the Levitical code?
Exactly. Someone in the promo post that, as I said earlier, has got
came down to hermeneutics.
Yes, exactly.
I think that's where Adventists have some big problems, because Adventists, based on Ellen, largely take a very literalistic hermeneutic of the Bible. They think they can just read a verse and understand it. Without understanding any of the history of it or the language of it. So
and never really defend it, though. But
so I think you can actually take the Bible very seriously and more than I do, and still not let any of those verses determine your view toward gay people.
Yeah. Well, this is what I want to come to. So if you personally believe the Bible is just a book of myths, important literature, but not something that you have to found your life on, well, then it doesn't really matter whether the clobber texts can be disproved or not. But in your opinion and your experience, have you gone, well, if I was going to be an Adventist and if I was going to be a Christian, then I want to prove that these clobber texts are wrong? Or have you gone, they're wrong, that's rubbish, the Bible is anti-gay, and so I want nothing to do with it? Which of those two have you landed on?
I don't think there's enough evidence to say that it's actually anti-gay. I think that the texts in question reflect the period, the times that they were written in. And you have to, again, the hermeneutic is important here, because if you take that into consideration, even if they were anti-gay verses, they represent a limited knowledge. Just like the flood. It didn't happen. Not the way it's described in Genesis, 6 and 7, where there are two different tales and two different gods mixed into one narrative. Even more interesting, it's kind of the same two as in Genesis 1 and 2, except here the compiler of this book put them together into one story. So what kind of bird was it, a raven or a dove?
Yeah.
Some people, but Adventists are very literalistic, as Ellen was.
Yeah.
And I was just looking through
I'll just bring a couple of comments up. Andy Mack, who I interviewed on the show a little while back, has been going through that kind of a leaving phase, and it sounds like she may have taken that even a bit further. She mentions here, Peter was right, I'm really struggling since leaving, real existential crisis. And I did mention too, Andy, and I'm glad you're watching, and thank you for your comment and being involved. I did mention that when I left, I did find a loss of identity because I'd wrapped up so
absolutely.
much. Yeah. And
A
so,
lot of people,
Andy, while you're watching, please reach out, and there's plenty of people who can gather around and help offer support that are in the comments here can reach out to you. And, just if there's people you want to talk to, I'm sure there's other people
there
you
are
can reach
very
out to.
wonderful people in the community.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Now, so how did you feel when you left? Because there's a for I think imagining, I'm just projecting here, for a person that's gay that's had to kind of keep it a bit secret. You've had to kind of strengthen your own identity within the Adventist identity. So when you left the Adventist church, did you feel that it was a struggle to lose the Adventist part because you'd already kind of refined who you were? Or was it more of a struggle, the whole gay thing coming out than leaving the Adventist church? To share with us some of those kind of potential
I don't
minefields.
even know how to respond to that. Because actually, the leaving of the church is a process, and it started long before the events that precipitated the crisis. I went to a Sabbath school class there, it still exists, though not in the same place and with the same name, but it was called the Heretics class. And in addition to that, we would brag about not believing all 27 or 28.
Yeah.
We readily admitted that, and I suspect that's still true. In Adventist academia, anyway, there are a lot of people that really don't believe. They just know the social rules and don't disobey those. So they don't bring meat to the potluck and whatever else they don't do. So they kind of they are in kind of the double line, the lack of integrity, really, is what I call it. You can't be integrated if you're living two different lives, but somehow or other they manage to find a way to do that. And it's fine for them. I have correspondence going right now with a friend that I've known since before birth because our parents were friends. That actually is president of an Adventist university, just leaving, and he's explaining what. And his wife is a minister, but not ordained, of course.
Mm.
And they kind of use the view of if we find a little niche where we're comfortable and we fit in there.
Yeah, that really interests me.
Find a way to make that work. I couldn't do that because I think being fully out as a gay man, well, obviously it destroyed the marriage to a woman, but there was no place for that.
Mm.
So I have many friends in Adventist kinship.
Mm.
Like just tonight, there's a book that's written in German about gay Adventists that they're going to translate into English. So I volunteered to help proofread it, and I said, I'll also tell my story if you want me to. But, I've known kinship people since college, actually. I think they're trying to if they're trying to change the church, I think it's an impossible task.
Yes, yeah.
I don't think any fundamentalist type church, literalist, really, it comes back to the hermeneutic. They're going to take the 6 verses and interpret them the way they want. And if they're objective, and I've never been an active member of the group, if the objective is to change the church, I think it's impossible. If the objective is to help people basically come out of the church, then that's a good mission because then it's needed.
I have a lot of respect for people like Gil Valentine, Matthew Cortman, Denny 14,
I
even
know
Ron
Gil Taylor.
Graybill, these guys, for their forthright kind of speaking. Matthew Lucio, I better not start because there's a whole list, but I have a lot of respect and I'm fascinated with their research and their historical approach and their scholarly approach. And I kind of also wish I was a part of their little group. They kind of there's different groups in all around the world of these kind of, I call them gospel Adventists and the scholarly types, and they gather together and they it's just fascinating the way that they talk about Adventism and bring out the good aspects of Adventism and the kind of gospel Adventism and they speak very fondly of Des Ford and this kind of thing. And yet I don't see them as a movement that's going to last that long within the Adventist Church. I feel like the fundamental kind of side, because it's the trunk of Adventism, those who are a bit more progressive, instead of ebbing left and right like a pendulum, it's more like they try and spring away from the church and then are snapped back into the church, or they leave. But particularly
Or their children leave.
That's right. Their children leave.
It's actually a generational change.
Droves. Yeah. This is what I'm saying. They're not really nurturing this movement. They're all getting older. They're retiring, dying. Their kids are leaving. Growing up in the church now is a very conservative. A lot of Adventist youth growing up into the church. You've got your Doug Batchelors and your Ted Wilsons that are ensuring this kind of the central trunk of Adventism is being strong and nourished. But what are your thoughts on, it's nice that these guys have their own bubbles and little places they can have Sabbath school and enjoy camaraderie. I'm jealous of it. I've got zero, I'm not trying to put it down in the slightest. I think it's fantastic. But why don't they have a sense of mission to kind of expand this kind of, they keep saying, oh, it's changing and things are changing, when it's demonstrably not. What gives them, A, what gives them hope, and B, why don't they have a sense of mission to kind of spread it, and make it more of an effective outreach within the Adventist Church?
Well, I can't answer for them. The only way I found was to just leave an unhealthy organization.
Right.
I do consider it a cult. It's a cult of Ellen. Because they can't totally move beyond her. There's no concept of present truth anymore. That is something that she, to her credit, had at one point. Although she had, her reaction to airplanes, for example, which is in that file I shared,
I want to come to that one in a minute, actually.
Yeah, I wrote down a few of the crazy ones in case we came to the crazy stuff, but I don't know.
Yeah. So you can't really answer why. Yeah.
I mean, I was Don McAdams' research assistant my graduate year. And in fact, I did most of the legwork, if you want to call it that, running over to the Heritage Center and to the White Estate for him when he was writing that, what's now a book on the half chapter on Huss.
Who was it again you just mentioned? Who did you mention again? It just cut out.
Don McAdams.
Oh, really? Oh, wow. I was listening a lot about his work yesterday when I was driving in another podcast. Was he from Southern?
No, he was at Andrews.
He was at Andrews.
I had World Civ from him.
He wrote a lot about plagiarism before even Walter Ray was saying it, and his predictions of if they don't address it, it's going to be somewhat like
he played that very politically to his advantage.
Right.
He did the plagiarism research.
Yeah.
As I said, I was his research assistant. I should
I'm
know.
blown away by this, Harvey, because you've raised two topics that I've literally been immersed in for the last 2 days.
And that was
And
in
I literally was
1972.
driving. I was literally driving thinking, boy, I wish I could find out more on McAdams. How can I do that? And here we go. You were helping him with the research. Wow.
I did. He, because of his father was publishing secretary of the General Conference for many years. Don grew up in Tacoma Park. He was seen as an insider. So he was trusted. So when he wanted to look at something that she'd actually written and had not gone through any editorial process, the actual original handwriting on paper. And
Wow.
he found the half chapter, or somebody did, on Huss. The chapters on Huss and Jerome. I think I don't know what happened to the Jerome part, but the Huss part was there, and he found the document, and he was, interestingly enough, probably because of who he was allowed to take it and use it and transcribe it.
Wow.
And then look at how that evolved into the final published project. And that's what the book is about. I don't know if you've seen the book. I have a version of it in my Crazy Ellen file because it came from him.
So
But
what was the book called?
I think it was, well, I may be remembering the original name and not the, at one point it was called Ellen White and the Protestant Historians, I believe.
Right.
Because she was largely copying from Protestant historians that were of her era. And so she shared many of their errors and prejudices in the actual book. But interestingly enough, he found, among other things, that her bookmakers took out a lot of her original writing.
Wow.
And mainly stuck with the plagiarized stuff. When she actually went off on a riff, they took it out. But one also has to understand about Ellen, among other things, is that it was about money. She always made money from her writing. As I mentioned earlier, that was the reason for the establishment of Pacific Press as separate from Review and Herald. She could get more royalties. She and James at that point, because that was before his death in 1881. So any of her words were carefully hoarded and then, if possible, published so that she made money.
Right.
And that's where that quote from about no color line in heaven, because all will be as white as Christ himself.
Right.
An outrageous statement, really.
Yeah.
Doesn't recognize the ethnicity of Jesus, among other things.
Yes. I know.
And it's quite insulting to black people. But she not only, there are evidence of her giving the talk in Vicksburg, Mississippi, but also later having it published, for which she got paid.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, I'll just share this, see if I've brought the right thing up. Is that the one that you were referring to?
Yeah. I think that's the published. Let me put my glasses back on.
Yeah. How old is he?
Here it's called. Okay, he took out Protestant, and that's fine. He changed the title slightly. I think the original title was Ellen G. White and the Protestant Historian.
Yes, yeah. And so you helped research that book?
Oh, yeah. Although it was mostly, I can't say that I did much of the research. I did the running around.
Yeah. But that's great, because that means you had your hands on all the material.
I had my hands on the materials, and I actually had at one point an original typewritten copy of it, which he gave me when I left and graduated. And later on, he asked me to return it. which I did,
Interesting.
interestingly enough, and I'm surprised I did this. I think my then wife shamed me into it. I actually returned it to him without copying it.
And you never got it back?
I never got that back.
Oh, so he the one that's for sale is the edited down version,
He did edit it down.
more palatable for the
Yeah,
leaders.
and I have that copy. And I think actually the published version is actually pretty close to the original.
Oh, okay.
But you see, he was very politically astute, and he wanted to be a college president, and he knew he couldn't have that out there floating around.
No. I want to come back to this whole Ellen thing now. We'll just leave the fired for being gay element in a moment. Got one more question on that, and then I want to deep dive into your thoughts on what we're talking about, this Ellen White kind of component. So to those who are compassionate, progressive Adventists, love the gospel, but do have a feeling that being gay is an abomination, or that you should at least not act on it. What are your comments to them? What would you kind of say to them? Because they want to love you, include you. They just don't want you to have positions of authority within the Adventist church because they believe the Bible is saying that being gay is a sin, or the act of acting on being gay is a sin. And then they often equate that with someone who's married and having infidelity outside of marriage. Whereas for a gay Adventist, if they thought that it was the same, well, then what does that mean about the act of gay intimacy? Are they saying that you can't get married and act on it? So I'm just trying to assess what advice would you say to those who are progressive Adventists, but who do draw the line with allowing gay intimacy and gay people having positions of leadership because the Bible says it's wrong?
First of all, I would like to hear from them how they define intimacy.
Well, the same as how they often define it as infidelity. They'll say, they'll say, just like a straight person must not commit adultery outside of marriage, therefore a gay person shouldn't act on any kind of adulterous behavior.
I think that's a very male perspective.
And I'm going on what comments have been produced in that promo.
They pretty much ignore the lesbians altogether, because I suspect they don't even think they can have sex. Men tend to be obsessed with ejaculation. Let's just be honest about it. So is that having sex? Was kissing a man in the South Bend airport, was that, what?
I think where I'm trying to go is some people are progressive Adventists that love the gospel and say, welcome gays, you should get married and have every job available in the church. And there's other progressive Adventists that say, hey, we love you, we want you to be in the church, but you're not allowed to be actively gay. The Bible says it's bad. One group saying the Bible says it's okay, you've just misinterpreted it, you fundamentalists, and the other side is saying, hey, we want to be progressive and love the gospel and be a little bit liberal, but they draw a line about the Bible. They say the Bible is accurate in its condemnation of gayness.
And I would say it's none of your business what I do when I'm not in public.
Yeah. I'm meaning more this notion of those that they don't. The progressive Adventists on both of these groups I'm talking about don't care what you do in private. That's not my point. My point is, to one group says that the Bible has been misinterpreted, and the other group says, no, it's been interpreted correctly. The Bible is against being gay. So to the progressive Adventist, there seems to be two views of thought. One that says the Bible, those clobber texts have just been misinterpreted, and the other group says, no, they've been correctly interpreted. Gay is an abomination. So to that group that says gay is, the Bible says it's wrong, what would you say to them?
Of course, I don't see any point in being an Adventist, so to me it's irrelevant.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
I don't know what else you can say, but
Yeah.
I do think, as I said earlier, I think they discriminate more against men than against women when it comes to that. I think that a lot of these guys can't even imagine women being sexual with each other.
Yeah, there's a certain kind of cognitive dissonance going on there.
Yeah, they just kind of ignore the women. Of course, they also ignore David and Jonathan and a few other instances in the Bible where there's some level of intimacy between men.
Mm. Well, someone wrote to me, so should those who gossip also lose their jobs? I mean, someone wrote in the comments in our promo post that the church, if they're going to fire you for being gay, they should fire you for gossiping as well, because that's, bearing a false witness is commandment number 9, I think. So
there's something about sexual issues that there's a lot of shame. Let's just be
I guess
honest
that's what I'm trying to drill down on. Yeah.
It's about they're projecting their own sexual shame.
But why isn't there a shame for gossiping? I mean, that made it into the top 10.
Yeah. But I know a lot of gay men. I'm in a group called Gay Men's Brotherhood, and there are a lot of men coming out of other churches that have exactly the same issues.
Yeah, okay.
In fact, almost all gay men of my generation, anyway, got a lot of shame. I mean, that's an issue that we're all still dealing with. Some of us in therapy.
Yeah. Oh, this is the thing.
Yes, I am in therapy for my Adventism too. I was just with my therapist this afternoon.
Yeah, wow.
Interestingly enough, she has a very interesting background to this, because she has an MDiv, and it was in Western Michigan.
Wow.
At Hope College, with the seminary attached to Hope, which is Western Theological, I think they call it. So she understands from a perspective that most therapists wouldn't. She gets Calvin. That's a Calvinist Reformed church.
Yeah. She'd be very helpful because of that.
And there are 2 Reformed churches in the U.S., and one is very conservative and the other is very much more liberal.
So I guess for someone like you, where it's not even really worth drilling down onto that topic because you've left the church, it doesn't matter to you anymore, to the gay Adventist who really wants to be an Adventist but is feeling this kind of pressure to hide it, or to stifle it, or to somehow eradicate it or push it down, to these that are then getting very behind these 6 clobber texts and trying to show the church, no, you've misinterpreted it, you've got it wrong. What advice would you give them? Is it futile? Should they just give up because it's just never going to change?
I wouldn't say necessarily that they should leave over that issue. I think there are more important issues to leave over, and that certainly Ellen is one of them.
Yeah, okay.
This is a cult of Ellen.
Yeah.
Nobody seems to want to admit that yet.
Yeah.
Or even, Adventists are very good at applying the term cult to other cults.
Yeah.
Like JWs or
Mormons.
LDS. They're just as much.
Yeah. What I've discovered... Yeah. And what I've discovered is that the progressive Adventist, the gospel Adventist, they have a much higher love for Ellen than just an inspired woman. They'll say, oh, she was just inspired and flawed and this kind of thing. But I just know that they love her. They love her to bits. They love her more than, the average kind of inspirational human.
And they haven't really read most of what she wrote.
Yeah. That's what I want to come to now. And I'll just bring up Simon Houston wrote another interesting comment earlier. Absolutely, Harvey. He mentioned a ministering of love in charge of hate and othering. And he also said, imagine having a mission to be nicer to people and more inclusive. Oh, wait, that's kind of what Jesus was talking about. But anyway, I love the Gospel Adventists, and I respect them, remaining Adventist and finding their people within that bigger denomination. I guess I just wish they'd kind of see it more of as a special calling, to not just say, hey, it's going to change, kind of with no it's just nebulous. There's no action I can see of them actually trying to bring about change. Maybe they are. They're just keeping it secret.
Do you think there are more of those proportionally in Australia than there are up here?
No, definitely not. I think it's very similar. I think North America, Australia, the stats are very similar, I think.
Okay.
I think small and dying, the Gospel Adventist.
Well, I think in the white parts, the Caucasian parts of the Adventist church, it's dying everywhere.
Yes, I agree.
I have my roommate from Newbold is still a very close friend of mine. He's Swedish, and he sees the same thing there. And Newbold itself seems to be on the verge of collapse.
Yes, yep. I think they are. Let's see. Sir Nilo has written, I wonder if all SDA employees were required to sign off on the 28 fundamentals each year, it might prick some consciences. Prick the consciousness. I remember when I was a school teacher at Avondale in the early 90s, we did get a fax from on high that was read out in our staff meeting. And it literally said, if you're working for the church but you feel you can't go along with the 27 fundamentals back then, you'd be better to leave. It was that clear. So Sir Nilo, it looks like that has happened. He also likes your Irish cap as well. Okay, I want to, and I feel like I want to get you back. What's that?
I'd forgotten that that's where it came from.
Yeah. My wife is Irish.
I see.
Yeah.
I had a lovely trip to Ireland once. I enjoyed it very much.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I've kind of gone every year for the last 12, 15 years, apart from the last couple. I feel like I want to, I'm not wrapping up at all, but I want to get you back and talk more specifically about your Ellen White and kind of thoughts, and also your involvement with Donald McAdams, because that's been a nice little surprise in this interview so far. So I'd like to get you back in a week or two and drill down more on Ellen White, but let's give people a taste of that now. You've got this kind of, what's the file called? You sent me it on Crazy Ellen.
I suppose I could be more diplomatic in what I called it. I've always called it that.
And you've mentioned that in your thoughts, Ellen White, there's a cult of Ellen that kind of ruminates throughout Adventism. Can you tell us a little bit about that now? Just go into your Crazy Ellen files and just share a few. We've got another 20 minutes. Just share with us some of your files there. The one on aeroplanes, I think, maybe could be interesting.
I wrote
just share a few things there.
Yes, she did say something. Where did I put that?
I'll just read out a couple of comments while you're finding that there.
Oh, well, we scrambled through so much stuff here while we were trying to get going.
Kelly Byrne has asked a question. I'll just read it out while you're looking there. If a woman or man liked animals since they were a child and after a logical age chose to act on that love, or chose not, where's this going, Kelly? Or chose not to act on it, isn't being gay, bi, lesbian a choice all the same? Just the same to marry hetero or not marry? And she's saying, not judging, she's just asking. Well, in my humble opinion, I remember when I was coming up to puberty and then hit puberty, And I remember all of a sudden going, whoa, girls, I've got this kind of attraction going on here. And it wasn't about a choice. It was this deep primal, it's not just chasing them around the playground now. And there was something that just really switched on. And I think, I'm pretty sure it's part of the natural process, the wiring of a heterosexual person, that kind of kicks in, and the attraction is way more than a choice, in my humble opinion. And from my understanding in chatting to gay friends, they, well before puberty, were also attracted to same sex, and as puberty kicked in, that kind of just powered up even more. So I might.
Something happens to the straight boys at puberty that does not happen to us.
No, it doesn't happen to you, but this sense of it being natural, I guess, is what I'm trying. Not natural, just there's a sense of there's something inside you that's drawing you to boys, and when you're heterosexual, there's something inside of you that draws you to girls. So when you're young, whether you talk about puberty or not, there's something wired into the heterosexual, and there's something wired into the. Look, I'm just speaking off the top of my head here.
Well,
I'm just saying. I don't think it's a learned social thing, is what I'm saying.
No,
I think it's a.
In fact, it happens in other species too. So there's that.
My understanding is that the percentage, not of those who are claiming to be, like it's a whole different ballgame now, but if you go back 10 years ago, the percentage of people claiming to be gay hasn't shifted much, even though the media has really made it totally fine for people to be gay or not. The actual numbers of people identifying as gay, say 10 years ago, hadn't risen at all. We're just shooting the breeze here, but I'm just trying to answer to Kelly. I don't think it's like, oh, I want to get married. Do I choose a boy or do I choose a girl? For me, I choose a girl.
Involved. There's no choice involved. It's just a natural outgrowth of who we are.
Yeah.
Well, here you were asking about some of the other crazy Ellen things.
Yeah.
I already mentioned that there would be no black people in heaven. Airplanes are of the devil. Certain races of men are the result of the amalgamation of man and beast. Biologically impossible, although it was at one point widely believed.
Mm-hmm.
What else do I have here? Oh, then she also apparently saw tall, majestic people, including Enoch, walking around on Jupiter and Saturn.
Have you got actual quotes of the airplane one?
Yeah, they're in the. I don't have them up on my computer right now, but they're in that. They're in the file that I shared.
Yeah, when we get you back in a week or two, we'll actually get you to read some of the actual quotes. But just give us some general thoughts. And you just moved off the screen a bit. See if you can move back on the screen a bit for us.
There would be no slaves in heaven. I don't know where that came from, because by the time slavery ended, most of them were Christian. The slaves actually largely adopted the religions of their slave owners. Where do you think all the Negro spirituals came from? Somehow or other, she didn't understand. She maybe didn't believe or understand that most of the slaves were Christian. So why would they not be in heaven? Because they're black? But then she says the blacks that are in heaven aren't really black. So I guess white was a good name for her. Although, of course, it wasn't her. It was her married name, obviously.
In the States, do you say black or people of color, or what's the correct terminology?
Just say blacks, yeah.
When I've chatted to some black Adventists off air that potentially are going to come on and do some programs, they express some of their concern with these comments you're talking about, with Jesus being white and the amalgamation of man and beast and whatnot. But they too don't want to come across as being disparaging of Ellen White or do something to destroy the church. This kind of deep love for Ellen, it just permeates the church. Why do you think it's so strong?
Well, I guess the groups that I was with weren't all that. They would just assume she went away because of all the testimonies. I mean, really, some of that stuff's pretty severe. I think she was very damaging to many people, and the cause of and they cause for need for therapy. So I don't know where they get this notion of desire of ages. I don't know. I mean, some of her writing is not judgmental, but a lot of it is.
Mm.
A lot of it is.
When you were working for Don McAdams, and researching and whatnot, I mean, you would have come across a lot of the plagiarism. Just lost my train. Yeah. So what you kind of notice when you look deep into that is that when people say, "Oh, but she wrote some beautiful things," they were often paraphrased from other writers, and then often Marion Davis or Fanny Bolton are responsible for making it sound pretty.
Yeah.
They're the ones that when you read some, like you mentioned, the raw material that you found from Huss and whatnot, some of her, and while she was a prolific writer, and I'm not saying that she didn't have this kind of inspirational personality and character and did good things, I'm not saying she didn't, but there's to say, oh, but some of her writings just changed my life and whatnot. Well, really, I don't think Marion Davis got as much credit as she should have gotten. What are your thoughts on that? Because you would have come across a lot of Fanny Bolton and Marion Davis kind of.
I'm trying to remember which one. I think it was Bolton. That doing that job practically destroyed her mental health.
Yes, Fanny, I think, spent her last few years in a mental institution, even.
Yeah. So
there's an interest.
Whoever can say that is very selective in what they read. Maybe they read Steps to Christ and
yeah,
Desire of Ages, and those are fairly innocuous books.
Yeah, they're a bit more benign. It's when you dig into her testimony. When you dig into her testimonies, you start going, "Whoa!" Yeah, and there's some that say, "Oh, well, we wish she didn't put her testimonies out, but she was like, my testimonies must be heard. After I'm dead and gone, they've got to be kept out there, and you've got to really make sure they're brought to the people."
But she was making money on that too.
Tell us a little bit.
I don't realize how much money she was making.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever been to Elmshaven or not.
No, but we've got our very own one just down here. Just got a mental blank.
Oh, that's right. You do have the thing in Currumbum.
Yeah.
That wasn't on an estate.
Sunnyside. Ours is called Sunnyside.
Yeah, after James was out of the picture, she started to roll in the money pretty well.
Yeah.
But she also had a lot of debt. So that's how the Adventist Church got ownership of the White estate. I mean, that really is an estate.
Yeah.
In the traditional sense, but they couldn't. She had so much debt that they had to give up control and move it all to Washington from Napa County.
I remember reading when her and James would travel from town to town, and they'd do little home fellowship, whatnot, talks, and he'd set the stage, and she'd have a vision, I remember them released, they had, is it Present Truth or Midnight Cry? There was some little newsletter they were talking about. And I remember that they even talked about how much they were selling them for. And even back then, this is 20 years ago when I read about it, I remember doing the maths on it and extrapolating that amount then to now, and thinking, wow, that they were only like 5 cents a periodical or whatever, but the 5 cents back then was pretty good, and it would have. I just thought, wow, that would have added up. They were monetizing this, and there's a part of me that goes, so what? Monetize? I mean, I rely on people sending me donations to keep this content going. So to those that say, hey, so what if she focused on the money? What are your thoughts on that?
I'm sorry, I was reading something that I don't know how you keep track of it all. I'm sorry, you rephrase the question for me.
Yes, so I have to rely on people making donations here. I definitely wouldn't say I'm focusing on the money, but I get $100 or so a week coming in from people supporting what I'm doing. But I love what I'm doing, and I put a good 6 to 10
than
hours.
having 21 people on your estate.
This is what I was about to say. How those that accuse her of monetizing her work, why is that different to someone who's just going, well, I need to also put food on the table? What's the difference?
The degree of greed.
Right. So in your study and perhaps researching for the Don McAdams book, did you come across that sense of greed?
No, because we were only looking at that one half chapter of
right. But in your other research?
Oh, well, I've certainly become aware of it when I run across it.
Yeah. Can you think of some examples? Can you think of some examples that kind of highlight the greed?
Not offhand, no. Other than having a big estate when she died, and the fact that she and James had to establish a publishing house so they would make more money.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting.
It was a lifelong pattern with her. It was also with James.
Yeah. I'll just give a quick plug for a book that I helped. I had nothing to do with the production of it, but I've helped make it available online. It's by, I'll just bring it up on the screen, John Borton, and it's available there at Amazon. It's in Amazon Music, actually. That was the only way I could kind of upload it, and it's his work 100%. I've had nothing to do with that, but I just helped get it there online, and it's available there. And he goes into quite an interesting amount of detail with a lot of the things we're talking about there. So I encourage people to go and check that out if they want. And I'll just put the link in the notes there as well. Yes, you were saying that often how do I do it? How do I keep track of all the comments? And in kind of closing up today, because I definitely want to get you back and drill down more on the Ellen White stuff and get some quotes and really we'll get some bullet points down and really make it a nice focused kind of cohesive discussion. So are there anything that's kind of popped up in the comments that you've seen that you'd like to add, or anything that you saw in the comments on the promo post that you'd like to talk about? Anything that you'd like to kind of close with that
I just see some nice friendly comments there.
Yeah, some really, I'm surprised. It's been very there's been no one that's really said, hey, this is an abomination, maybe they're all asleep.
Maybe they don't feel safe doing that here, or maybe I only blocked one person, so
in the
and then actually I've seen him. I think he's on SDA Fight Club. I think he posts quite a bit there.
So, who are some of the, when you were at Andrews before you were fired for being gay, when you were there, can you just remember some of the scholars and academics that were there at the time with you, and maybe share a couple of positive memories of those? because there's some
Well,
very
you
interesting.
mentioned Bill Valentine earlier. He was a student there, and I got quite, actually fairly acquainted with Gil. He made me a Facebook friend. I can't remember.
Yeah,
George
he's a
Knight was
genius, I
there.
reckon.
I always enjoyed George.
Who was that?
George Knight, I think.
Oh,
Was his
right.
name.
Yeah.
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 I was a music major for much of the time. Warren Becker was a, I mean, these are all beautiful people that I enjoyed
Yeah.
being there.
Yeah.
The people that went to the Sabbath school class that I was in, they were mostly faculty.
Yeah.
And they were struggling with what to do with their specialties where they couldn't reconcile it with.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the thing I guess I was wanting to highlight there. There's some incredible people that work on these campuses of PUC and Loma Linda and Andrews and Avondale. There's some really, really interesting people.
But it will be interesting to see what happens next, because in some cases the next generation is happening. I see Meredith Jones Gray at Andrews, and her father Harold is a math teacher, professor. Of course, that's a safe one to do in Adventism because there really isn't any conflict with Ellen. You can do math and you can do chemistry, but don't you dare do earth sciences or biology.
Yeah, that's right. Go for the safe ones.
Because you'll be a Harold James, who is the geologist, a wonderful person.
Yeah. See, that's interesting because that's a whole other conversation there where, Ted Wilson has made one of the compliance orders on the compliance document is that as an employee, you must agree that the Earth is only 6,000-ish years old.
Well, he says that now?
It's in the compliance document that came out, I think, 2019. It's one of about 6
I've long
things.
since lost track of all of that.
Yeah.
I remember him too.
Yeah. Yeah.
He was a student. Probably the year, actually, and I was a student still at that point. My graduate year, I think he was in the seminary and worked at the radio station.
Yeah.
Now, there had been a political dust up at the radio station, which is why I was working for Don and not still at the radio station. So I didn't have a lot of direct contact with him. My former wife grew up with him. She always called him Teddy.
Yeah, wow.
They're about the same. They might have been in the same class.
Far out.
I think they're about the right age, a couple of years older than me.
Wow. Are you on good terms with your wife? Were you able to reconcile a lot of the hurt from the past?
Sadly, I have to say it's her choice at this point, and the answer is no.
Right.
I'm going to send her another note. She says I trigger her.
Yeah.
And she doesn't, she's a therapist. So is my daughter. And I would have expected more of therapists in being able to handle difficult relationships. But neither of my children will speak to me either.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to send them a Father's Day card. And that's coming up. And I'll send something to Coral too, because she's living she looks a mess. I mean, she's as big as I'm sorry to see it. I shouldn't even say anything. I don't know. It's her choice, and she's living with my son. They have a house together. And with her, a lot of it was, I think, money. I took the dream house away. She wanted to retire in. But I couldn't imagine living in a 4,000 square foot house and pretending to be married and being secretly unhappy.
Yeah, boy, there's so much pain
I would
there.
love to see some healing happening there, and I will remain open to that. But I don't know if it'll ever happen. But the ball is in her court.
There's valid pain on every single page of that story. Yeah. yours, theirs. Yeah. Angela Lima writes that she had a friend who was fired from being gay. He was a chef at an Adventist academy, and they have you kept in touch? A, when did you leave the Adventist church? And B, have you kept in touch with other gay friends that are still in the church and heard any of their kind of stories?
Those are questions for me.
Yes.
I pretty much left when I left Andrews, so that would have been in 98.
Okay.
Think.
Yeah.
Now with Facebook, of course, there's all kinds of ways to bring people back together, at least in that space. So Bob Bouchard, I don't know if you know him or not.
Who was that?
Bob Bouchard, Robert Bouchard.
Yes. Yes.
He and I were history students together, and we graduated together with master's degrees too. So we may go to a reunion. I went around the world with him, and it was completely celibate.
Yeah.
He was coming out. He was already somewhat out. I was way from that. I was far distant from being able to accept that. So yes, I may see him in September at the reunion.
Yeah. Okay.
And I've stayed in touch with.
You stayed in touch with various people. Yeah.
Oh yeah, Judy and John Ney, Brian Strayer.
Yeah.
He was in that class too. I mean, I don't have any hostility toward any of them. There's no reason to.
No. How did you stumble across SDAQ&A?
Facebook, probably through.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Because I've enjoyed your comments and whatnot for a little while now, and that's why I invited you to come on the program.
Maybe through the SDA Fight Club. I don't know. A lot of times I look to see,
Yeah, Peter Veach has been good at sharing the word. Yeah.
And some of the same people are on
on
both, and then sometimes they cross post, so it's easy to kind of
Well, I'm glad you stumbled across us, and we've been able to kind of become friends and have this conversation. And I definitely want to have you back again soon. So I'll talk to you off air about that. Simon Houston writes,
"You're always welcome to visit."
Oh, I'd love that. What part are you again? You're at the California
side. Seattle.
North of Seattle. Yeah.
Between Seattle and Vancouver.
Yeah.
Wow. So there's a lot of good stuff here to see.
Nice part of the world.
The North Cascades National Park, we're right on the doorstep of.
Yeah, I've always wanted to.
Vancouver Island, of course, are interesting, and
the
Big Peninsula, and Mount Rainier, and all the rest.
I was at Vancouver Airport once.
Okay, yeah.
They lost my guitar.
You lost your guitar there?
They lost my guitar.
Oh,
anyway, I got it back in the end.
Well, you'll have to come back.
Yes, I would love it. I would love it. Isaac Cabrera has written, "Hey, I'm in Vancouver. I'd love to meet you." So there we go. See you guys. And Simon, we'll finish on this one. Simon wrote to you, "So sorry to hear all of that, Harvey. The pain is real, and the SDA Church is needless, pointless, and useless in its responses. Have you found that they've reached out to you at all in some kind of way to officially connect with you, or did it just end and that was it?"
I'm about halfway done. They did, in a sense, the church there did, but it was Mighty Dwighty, and I can't stand him. He's so fake. Dwight Nelson. So I wouldn't see them.
What were you saying about Dwight? I missed that.
Dwight Nelson, Mighty Dwighty.
Oh, right. But what was his job? How was he involved?
Pastor, Pioneer Memorial Church.
Right. And he reached out, but you felt that it was disingenuous.
Yeah, I didn't want anything to do with him.
Yeah.
I think he sent out one of his associates actually that drove out.
Right, right. Well, I've loved our conversation today, Harvey, and I really appreciate you taking the time. It must be getting late there, and I am looking forward to chatting with you again in a week or two. And so go and buy
Okay.
a microphone. Go and get a good microphone, and
Yeah.
we'll have a good conversation
I
there.
thought we had one, but I guess I was wrong. So that's okay. We'll do
No,
better next time.
it's been fine. No one's
Maybe
been
this will
complaining.
start to heal a little bit.
Yeah, everyone's a big fan of the hat, though. You'll need to have that ready for next time. And just
Yeah,
a quick
right.
plug
But
for tomorrow, just to everyone that's watching. Tomorrow, I'm interviewing two people that I met at the festival I was at in Melbourne over the weekend. And they are what I'd say very fundamental conservative Adventists. They love the great controversy. We had a great chat, actually, because I'm not trying to tear apart anyone in the Adventist church. We're having conversations. They're going to come and talk about their love for Ellen White and the great controversy. So that's tomorrow, I think 11:30 my time, which is 6:30 LA time. So you work out all the other times, everybody. But until next time, Harvey, we'll look.
here's a question I have for them then.
Yes, tell me.
In the great controversy, she has Jesus coming back at midnight. In what part of the world would that have been? It isn't midnight all over the world at the same time.
Not at the same time.
No.
You'll have to send that question
Is
to
it
me, and
coming
I'll ask.
back 24 times, or is
Yeah.
there something else going on there?
He eases in at the midnight, just over Greenwich Mean Time, and then just stays with that midnight shadow all around the earth until. But then it's not simultaneously. Oh, hang on, I have to think about that one. Maybe it's via Zoom at midnight. Oh, hang on, but then there's different Zoom midnights. Yeah, you've stumped me.
Okay.
Until next time, see you, Harvey. See you,
Yeah, bye-bye.
everyone. Great to see you again, and we'll be back tomorrow.
Okay. Bye-bye.